I've just launched this book.
We've read that book.
Oh, you have as well. Okay, great.
Yeah,
So,
we've read it on the Kindle version, because there's so many interesting things about not only the book, but you and some of the things that you've written. What I thought I'd do though is let you give an intro to yourself, just in your own words, rather than me doing so. So if you don't mind just kind of telling us kind of who you are.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'm happy to say I'm at a point in my life at 62 years old where I actually know pretty well who I am. You know, it's taken me a lot of years to be able to answer such a question.
Yeah.
And I always encourage my younger coachees in management and leadership roles, don't worry if you can't articulate your purpose. It will come. You know, so, but I am somebody who I get my joy of life from seeing people walking on their true path. That's me. And I've done it for myself. And it took me this journey. And I always had that dream when I was a schoolboy even. You know, I can remember going back to many, many, many years ago. I'd forgotten a lot of my thinking from that time until I wrote the book. It came back to my conscious memory.
Wow.
But I remember thinking when I was very, very young, the whole concept of that you work one job your whole life, you stop working and then you die quite soon afterwards, you know, when you've retired. I thought that just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense. Who would want to live like that? And I was 11 or 12 and I used to ask my classmates, don't you think that's silly? They'd say, no, I'm not even thinking about that. And I said, well, I'm not going to live like that. They said, well, how are you going to live, Ray? I said, well, I was only 11. I didn't know that what I was going to say made any sense. I said, I think I'm just going to work twice as hard in my first half of my life and have enough money to spend for the second half. That was my simplistic view. But my life kind of worked out like that, you know, so it was really bizarre that I thought that way and then forgot that I did. But to answer the question, who am I? So I'm in the world to serve people who wish to live life true to themselves. And I do that whether it's in a social setting with my family, as a leadership coach. I do that in any context, but that's my joy. That's my interest. That's what I'm fascinated by. That's what I search for more information on. How do we do that? And I now work as a leadership coach for the last 15 years. So I'm coaching people in many different organizations, you know, in different countries, in different ways, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes in small groups. I run this program for the Asian Leadership Institute, which is where you get 3 CEOs together and me, and it's lovely. And it's a really great way of learning.
Where's Asian Leadership Institute based?
In Thailand, in Chiang Mai.
Yeah.
It's a lovely organization. I can introduce you to the people there if you want.
That would be great. Obviously, throughout your book and with the charities that you're involved in and with your professional endeavors, Southeast Asia is not foreign to you.
No, I'd never been to Asia before. Friends of mine suggested I took this 6-month sabbatical and did some traveling.
Yes.
After the divorce and my father's death and the demise of First Place, the business I had.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, why not? That sounds like a great idea. 6 months. So I just by chance had started seeing a girl in London who said, I'm going to Thailand. I'm going to go and find a home there. Yeah, but I'm going to travel for a year first. And when she said, as you saw in the book, you know, why don't you come with me? It's like, wow, okay. That sounds like a great idea.
What a great catch.
Yeah, at the time, it was like just what I needed. It was a bridge that took me out of my own thinking and my own life and gave me an adventure and a way of sort of really, you know, I messaged someone this morning on LinkedIn who said, I was thinking about reading your book, but I got scared because I didn't want to be tipped over the edge and leave my life because my husband was scared I might quit my job or something. And I said, don't worry, you won't be in that place when you read the book. It's not about, the book's not advocating going traveling. That just happened to be the circumstances I was in, because it gave me a chance to step away from the rigidity of my own thinking, which was so conditioned because of the environment I was in. I needed to be in a completely and utterly different environment so I could give myself the space to think differently.
Yeah.
It was just what worked for me. And when I did my first Vipassana retreat in 6 months into the journey, because I was basically in Thailand, in paradise, on lovely beaches and drinking coffee. So the setting of the life looked great on the outside.
Yeah.
But inside, I was anxious, scared, vulnerable, feeling like a failure, dealing with issues of guilt and shame about how I'd screwed up my life. I was not at peace. I was really the opposite.
Yeah.
And then when someone I met traveling, I described this and said, how can I navigate this? They said, why don't you do a Vipassana retreat? And I said, what's that? I'd never heard of it. You go into a monastery with Buddhist monks for 10 days and you sit in silence and you observe your own mind and learn from it. And I did that. And I came out like a different person. My vibration had changed. I was still. I could see the dilemma of the human condition that they call suffering in Buddhist terms. But there's a cycle we all go into where we crave and want and desire. And that leads to clinging. And then we get the thing and it's temporary pleasure or happiness. And as it wears off, the cycle starts again. We start wanting and needing and clinging again for more of it. And I never understood this cycle before. And so Asia gave me access to a kind of wisdom and understanding that I was technically a well-respected leader in England. I'd received the Daily Telegraph Business Leader of the Year award in 2002. So on a technical level, I was obviously doing a good job, creating clear visions, supporting my colleagues, coaching my management team, doing all the right things technically. But this part of my understanding was missing, what it means to be a human being, the psychological dilemma of that. I never understood it directly. Wasn't even aware of it. So it was great for my awareness.
Okay, I want to dig in on that.
Yeah, go for it.
You coach people who are in a business context.
Yeah,
I take it.
I do. Yeah.
Your own story has these quite polar extremes. You didn't meet with mild or moderate success. You didn't become the junior vice salesperson at an organization. You met with quite considerable success in business. And things didn't come apart a little bit. There wasn't a little bump in the road or something for you.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the wheels fell right off of the side of the wagon.
Yep.
At home, with your work, with your physical condition. So already we've got two extremes. And Ray, you didn't ameliorate all of that by just sort of slowly getting back to work of a Monday and picking up something like a regular pace, right? You met a cutie and went to Thailand and went way over into the deep end and said, I'll sit still in the well, maybe it's the prison of your own mind, or maybe it's the comforts of your own mind. It's with your own mind for many hours at a time and many days on end.
Yeah.
My question is, the people that you're coaching and guiding, are they experiencing extremes at that level? Or if we had some kind of a chart, is your story quite high volatility on as we chart it, and theirs tends to be smaller wiggles across the center line?
That's a great question. I don't know that that's how it is, because when I was in the monastery and doing the Vipassana retreat and learning from the monks who were teaching us about the Dharma, what occurred to me was that when you're in a state of dis-ease or not at peace in yourself, the circumstances are going to be different for each person, but the feeling of being not at peace is the same for all of us. It's not a scalable thing. It's like you're not more unhappy if a car tires just got punctured than if someone's died. There's suffering and unhappiness with everything. Life is full of events that bring that suffering and unhappiness. And there's no scale. It's like sometimes you think, oh, that person, they've had all these deaths and unfortunate, the house is burnt down, and all that's happened to me is I lost some money and I didn't get the promotion I wanted or something. So I shouldn't be suffering in myself as much. But it's not true. With suffering comes, it's part of life. So I think that's important to recognize. It's there's no scale to it. And then the second thing is I missed out a bit of my story, which I think is really important part, which people who read the book will see, was I was so unable to get myself out of the depths of despair I was in when my wife, who was my business partner, said, I'm leaving you, I'm leaving the company. It was so sudden. I was shocked how how I didn't see that coming. I clearly, a part of me had sort of gone to sleep, my awareness. And I was so shocked and feeling useless in some ways, not being able to see my way out of that, given I ran a coaching business, but I couldn't dig my way out of the black hole I was in at all. And eventually a wise person said to me, don't try and figure this out with your head. You won't. Why don't you, the best thing you can do right now is go and find someone else who needs help and support and just put 100% of your attention on them. And you'll work it out, but don't keep staring into it. You'll find a way. So I did. And I went to Australia, which was a weird thing because my close friends had cancer, and I heard about this, and I called and said, I want to find someone I can be 100% in service to for a while, and it sounds like you need some help. Can I come over and look after you? And she said, yeah, that'd be great, because she had a young son and a husband who worked full time. So I went and stayed with her for a month, took care of her, and then I had a few days where I could go to another place called Cairns in Australia and visit a friend. Julie, she is in the book. And she said when I got there, yeah, in a couple of nights, my mum and I are going to see a play in the theatre. Would you want to come? I said, yeah, of course, I've got, definitely. And in the interval for the play, I saw in the program, which described the actors and stuff, that they were auditioning for the next production, and it was a play about a British member of Parliament called Out of Order. And I was familiar with the play because I'd seen it in London or knew of it. And I turned to them just for a joke and said, oh, I should be in that play. I've got the perfect British accent. I would be great. I'm not an actor. I had no training or anything. It was just a joke, really. And they said, well, actually, we know the director of the play. Why don't you go to the audition? You'll be here. And I said, no, that's ridiculous. I don't have any training. There'll be loads of real actors there who want those parts. And I won't stand a chance, And I've got 5 clients in England who I've promised I'll be back, and I've given my commitments to work with them. And frankly, I need the money to pay my mortgage, and there's no way I can not do that, because I was now living on my own in the same house in London, but having to pay for it all myself because my wife had left. So they said, well, okay, I understand. Just go for fun. It'll be a good experience. Something you can say, I did it while I was on holiday. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went to this audition. I threw myself into it 100% because it was fun. And at the end of that evening, the director came to me and said, Ray, tell me a bit about your situation. Are you living here? I said, yeah, I live here. I didn't want to say I didn't in case they just ruled me out automatically. He said, well, we're going to think about who we're going to cast. I said, when are you going to decide? They said, in a week. And I knew I'd be back in England by then. So I said, okay, well, here's my number, my friend's house, just ring and tell me. So about 2 days later, when I arrived in London, my friend called me within 2 hours of my house and said, guess what? Wayne's called. Not only they want to offer you a part in the play, they want to offer you the leading role in the play, the central comedic actor, 400 lines in the script. This guy, even a professional actor would have sort of thought, oh my God, can I do this? Now, luckily, my sister-in-law is an actress professionally. So I went to her and said, this is what's happened. Can I blag my way through this? Could I get away with this and do this? And she looked at the script with me and she said, yeah, I think you could. I think I think there's a way you could manage this. So I thought, right, according to my values of integrity, the only way I can say yes to this is if I get the blessing of the 5 clients that I've come back to work with and tell them honestly, no fudging, and say, if each one of them says, yeah, I will support you, go and do it. Or if anyone said, no, I really need you to do the work you've committed to do, I'd say, no, I won't go. So I called each one. And they all said, if Ray, they knew my circumstances, they knew about my separation and stuff. They all said, if I was in your shoes, I would definitely go. I think you should do it.
Wow. And
I went back to Australia 3 days later and I acted in that play and it was sensational. And
you didn't even have time to get jet lag.
No, I literally lived the life of another person for 4 months.
Yeah.
literally my daily routine, my clothes, what I was doing each day, acting on stage, getting the applause from the audience. It was like literally living someone else's life. And as I noticed when it was all over and I was about to fly back to London, a feeling of dread in my body. And I thought, what's that about? That dread. I couldn't face go. I thought, oh my God, I don't want to go back to being Ray the businessman in London. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, but hang on a minute. He's a character like George Pigden in the play. He's a character that I've created. I just haven't done it consciously, and I've done it over a long period of time, but he's still a character. And I think in Tony Robbins's book, Unleash the Power Within, you know, he talks about in life, we mainly think of ourselves as the actor in our life, the character, but we're also the script writer and the director of the film we're in. And so if you look at your life from those vantage points, you can either change the character's features, you can change his voice, his walk, you know, you can change any aspect. You can rewrite the script and the things that he says typically, or you can, from a directing point of view, you can just write that character out of the story or end the series. You know, you get all these options. And so I knew going back, right, I need to kill that character off, Ray the businessman. I need to end that series. I don't want to be that character anymore.
Piano dropped on his head in a
yeah. So I made a decision to end that character, and that's how it happened. So, you know, I'd done 25 years in business. I'd been a successful CEO for 10 years. I thought, for now, I want to kill that character, and I want to kind of be a different character for a while. So I didn't want to be like, you know, David Schwimmer, who plays Ross in Friends. I thought, I don't want to be Ross for the rest of my life, you know, like he is, stuck in that kind of image. And so I killed off that character and decided to sell my house in London. And that was the main thing that really freed me from the financial pressures, which were keeping me stuck in the former character. And that's an important part of the story, because I didn't expect to get that insight from being in the play. I just thought it'd be fun, but that majorly adjusted my mental software and my orientation. That was a massive insight and enlightenment for me.
Well, I can share something that's happened in our world with you that I'm sure you'll just go, of course, Kevin, of course, which is that as we've been building academies for quite serious professionals, you know, people with 2, 3 professional degrees and 20 plus years experience, it's like, what do these people have to learn? Theater has come through many times with some of the really real breakthrough insights. So Ray, we're currently working on a piece on Laban movement. I don't know if you've heard about this, but
no,
there's a way of just kind of categorizing how people move. You know, there's a difference between sort of rapid movements versus slow and steady ones, or, you know, fidgety movements versus quite predictive ones. That comes from theater. And does it ever translate into, you know, the way that partners in law firms need to sit and be with their clients and listen to them, or the way that people sit in and convene in a boardroom or another professional context?
It makes so much sense.
Come through in things like remembering things that you want to say that are complex, and the gift that actors have for digesting and memorizing vast quantities of material, and projection and a bunch of other things. So theater really has something to say about life in conventional corporate living.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible what an impact it had on my way of looking at things at that time. That was the prayer being answered for me. I was praying for a breakthrough, a way of seeing things differently, and that was what took me out of the dark hole. That was literally
do you still have some of the lines from that character?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Permanently seared in your
I'm afraid so. Yeah. I mean, because George was a very effeminate kind of mummy's boy. Oh, he spoke like this with a really silly voice, you know, like Kenneth Williams in the Carry On films. And he had to, the MP that he was protecting was up to all sorts of no good. He was having an affair with his secretary in the hotel, and his wife comes to visit him. And so George has to distract his wife, and he pretends he's had this love crush on her for years. And she says, he says, come with me to my room across the balcony. We'll go out through the window. And she said, oh, well, what about my bag? It's got my nightie in it. And I have to say, oh, you won't need your nightie with me. Ridiculously camp lines. But yeah, I remember them all because they got rehearsed, and we performed that play a lot. So they stuck in my mind, some of them.
So there's a question that I think has been knocking around my head as we were reading your book and watching some other interviews that you've done. You don't sort of operate from a fixed place. It's not one set desk, and you fly in planes and you move around and so forth. You have a number of clients and you coach them. Just logistically, how do you do that? Because I think when you say things like, I sold my house, or I have multiple clients and I'm committed to them, the average professional does not know how to reconcile those two things.
Yeah, and it's tricky. I can't say it's like works perfectly. I sometimes have trouble getting an accommodation for the period I need it and having all the facilities. It takes a bit of extra effort. And also my goalposts keep moving, because now that I've finished the book and I've finished writing, and I largely have curtailed a lot of travel, partly because of the pandemic, which made travel much more logistically difficult and challenging.
Yeah.
I'm now virtually all of my work is now virtual in terms of coaching. That's one of the big advantages of the shift to virtual for me. It's not great in other ways. I value connection, I value community. I love being with people and hugging and talking in real time. This is really important for me as a person, but I can sacrifice those things for a while, to work virtually. So the working virtually makes it, much easier logistically.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered the question, but I'm thinking about this at the moment. Is something I'm sort of looking at, maybe creating a base property in the UK and buying a property here and using that as my base. I guess what I've done, the shift for me is like when I was before I started this journey, I would need to know the answer to that question. I would need to have a plan and work it all out and have it in place.
Yes.
But now I am really happy leaning out the front of the train engine as it's going down the railway track and laying the next piece of track as I'm going. And I don't know what's beyond the next piece. And I've become much more comfortable living in that place than I ever was before. I'm not trying to control anything. I really mean this. I trust that the universe has my back, because I know it does from this journey. And whatever I need kind of shows up when I need it. So yeah. I don't need to know to the last moment how I'm going to manage the logistics. But, I think these days businesses seem to be very reticent to fly people in and accommodate them when they can do it virtually at a much lower cost.
Yes.
And it works better from a time perspective. Having said that, I love being in Singapore. I'd love to come to Singapore and work with people in the flesh, as it were, if that makes sense. And I think in some instances it would. So I'm not ruling that out either.
Yeah, we're watching that very closely, and sort of I think the whole world is watching it closely and seeing what has or hasn't been lost. So some things are very easy to count.
Yeah.
Such as cost of flights. That's pretty easy to count. The drift that might happen in a relationship, very hard thing to measure by contrast.
Yeah, I heard someone I had someone talk to me about this a couple of days ago, saying, how do you create a sense of friendship in a team? Because I work in teams as an associate, and I'm actually really good friends with many of them. I literally visit them at their houses. We do sports together. We do the things that normal friends do, because we're in proximity. But how do you create that experience of being friends with people in a company or team where you've never even met your colleagues, and you're never going to, because you're in distant locations and there's no way of doing that? I don't think it's possible. I don't think you can. It doesn't feel the same. I don't know how that works.
I have a funny anecdote for you there.
Right.
The second author that we interviewed in this series is a professor who specializes in Aristotle's theories of friendship and the relationship between friendship and politics.
Yeah.
In particular. And there's this line in wise old Aristotle's writings on the business of friendship. It's excellent. I'll share it with you,
Oh,
Martin.
send me the link. Yeah.
It's not a big chapter, but the particular line that I'm thinking of is, he says, canonical friendship requires eating the canonical amount of salt together. And that was like some old, like Akkadian proverb or something that was Socratic. So it turns out that that's something like 50 pounds of salt. And the meaning of the proverb is that you need to have shared so many meals together that you would have consumed that much, so 50 pounds of salt together. And by that time, you have what they call a virtue friendship, or a sort of
50 pounds of salt. Wow.
Yeah. So you just imagine how many, I mean, so the joke that we were making is it depends on how salty the meals are, but.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
but the core concept has been there for a few thousand years, that you have to break bread together to get to sort of the deep friendship.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that sort of scares me a bit about the way the world's moving, because that can't be financially equated somehow. And there has to be a trust and a leap of faith that not everything is calculatable. You know, like, what is the cost to a business organization that doesn't create the space for people to actually just hang out together and just love each other, you know, and be together?
So what do you make of the rise and continued rise of coaching in the corporate world at all? This would have been a bit of an ethereal conversation 30 years ago and 50 years ago. We wouldn't talk about it at all. A paid coach, an external individual that is getting cash money to what? You know, listen to me gripe about my problems. Like, what the heck's going on there?
Yeah,
what do you make of that? Why has this even emerged in the last decades?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure I have the best answer that someone could give to that question, but how it looks to me, how it seems to me, is that I think it's recognized now. I don't know how it's come to be recognized, but it's recognized now that to be a great leader, an exceptional leader, you need self-awareness. You need to be able to lead your own life well. And I think in whoever looks after organizational development in big companies, HR, talent leaders, you know, OD people, I mean, they've come to realize that they've got to provide the resources and support for individuals in their organization to become self-aware, to become self-mastery, and to learn self-mastery, because there's no chance that those people are going to develop into the leaders of tomorrow the organization's going to need if they don't have that. And one of the most effective ways of supporting someone on that journey is to give them access to a coach, because the coach has the role of enabling them to identify where the gaps are and what parts of themselves they want to develop, but more importantly, how to build a strong core. Because I think it's very hard for individuals on their own to work out, what are my values, what's my vision, what's my purpose, why am I doing what I'm doing, what are my limiting beliefs and what are my empowering beliefs. I mean, these things if you've got awareness, you can do those things, but if you don't have it, it's like you're locked outside this 5-star hotel and you don't have a key to get in.
Right.
And the coach is the doorman. It's not providing you the actual facilities or the answers, but he's helping you get access to it.
Yeah.
And I think there's just more and more original and innovative ways of coaching. Like, for example, in the book, I knew that I didn't want to return to the world of owning and operating a business when I was 4 or 5 years into the journey. It was clear to me, because even though I was very competent in that role as a CEO, and I did it really good, I just didn't feel good in that role. I felt too pressured, too stressed. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. And so I thought, I thought I really enjoy working one-to-one. So I thought, I really want to focus now on just working one-to-one as a coach with people. I know how to support someone who's on that path. And I thought, well, how am I going to do that? I'm in Asia. I don't know anyone. I don't know any businesses. So I reached out into LinkedIn and put Coaching Asia in the search box. And a few people came up and I didn't know any of them. And I wrote messages to 1 or 2 and said, I would like to start part-time coaching of business leaders in Asia. How do I do that? Who do you advise me to speak to? And they all said, oh, you should just talk to this guy, Warapat. He was head of the APAC, Asia Pacific Alliance of Coaching, which was he was based in Bangkok, but it's all over Asia. And so I called him and he said, are you in Bangkok? And by chance I was. The next week I was going to Bangkok. He said, come see me. So I went to see him and he said, what are you looking for? And I told him, I said, I'm embarrassed to say this to you, Kevin, because I tell you, I really thought about what do I really want? Not what do I want if I said it would impress someone else.
Yeah.
What do I really want? And when I looked at the list of things I wrote down, it was laughable. I thought, I want to work 20 hours a month. I thought, who's he kidding? 20 hours a month, you're a lazy guy, something like this. I want to do it virtually. Now, in 2010, virtual wasn't a thing. It was only face-to-face. I thought, I was using Skype to call my mum regularly. I thought, why can't I use Skype to call clients? I mean, why not? So I want to do it virtually.
12 years ahead of your time, sir.
I want to be able to do it in this way. And this is some other things. I thought, what else? Well, if I want to work on the days and hours that I want to only, not what I'm told I need to. And if I start working part-time freelance, I don't want any coercion or pressure, subtle or direct, from that organization to push me into a full-time role or up my commitment or do more. You know, that was a fear I had. I don't want this. And I counted this 7 or 8 things, and this was my list. I never shared it with him, but I knew what I was looking for. So when I went to Warapat, he said, let me connect you with a couple of people. About 2 days later, I got a call from Danielle Marchant in Singapore. I put this story in the book. She said, Ray, I've just got your profile from Warapat. We must talk. We've been a successful coaching company in Europe, and we've moved to Singapore and we've opened an operation here. We're coaching global companies. And she told me some of the names. They were like really big companies. She said, the problem we've got is we don't have enough coaches on the ground in Asia. And another thing, I don't know if you'd be happy with this, Ray, but we decided we're only going to do coaching virtually. I said, you're kidding me. You are kidding me. She said, yeah, we'd be fine with you. If we could get 20 hours a month from you, we'd be delighted. We'd be really grateful. And so I could not, literally, this is an example of how I know the universe has my back, because that happened I went from not knowing how I was going to do coaching in Asia to 3 single steps to be having a roster of clients, and I was coaching them virtually with no effort. I mean, just literally 3 steps and I was doing it. How do you explain that? There's a kind of synchronicity to it that comes, I think, when you start to choose to live your own life in alignment. And this is what I mean about being mastery of your own life. When you're leading your own life that way, all your decisions are based on what's important to you, what you really, really, truly need and want, how it serves others and all those things. Then these things start to fall into place. But when you're not living that way, everything's got an effort level to it. You have to push really hard. You have to really push, and it doesn't always work, and it feels like an effort. And this flow concept came from the sporting world, you know, and I really understood it intellectually, but I never really grokked it in my body until this happened. Yeah, so that's how it worked for me, and so I've been virtually coaching ever since then.
Have you gotten to a point before where you have too many clients and you have to let some go?
I had a point last year where I almost thought, well, I got to start saying no to some. I'm just too, if I don't, I'll slip back into that. I'm full-time working. And I was thinking this because I was trying to get the book finished. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever written a book, but I never had. It's my first one. But gosh, it demands a huge amount of time and energy from you writing a book. You know, because you've got just the draft, then the two rewrites, you've got loads of conversations with the printer and publisher and the book cover designer, and you're fitting all this in around your work hours, you know, and you don't have a life for a year. It's horrid, you know, but it's great too. I'm not, you know, I can't in any way complain about it, but it's quite a lot. It's like having a second job that's unpaid.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a reason to be sober about making a decision to write or not.
Yeah, exactly. But I wouldn't have changed
I'll share
it.
with you one of the reasons why we love talking to authors, because we've spoken to many people who are just good thinkers and leaders in their own right, but we have a real preference for authors. And I think one of the reasons is that the process you just described means they've really had to beat these ideas up. There's 20 good ideas that never made the cut.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
there's a chapter that they were in love with and they had a fist fight with their editor, and you know, the editor won and it had to go on the cutting room floor, and but they have just really meditated on the material a long time, and that comes through in the way, well, even in the way that we're having this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that's
just
true in my
passing
case.
on.
You can see this is quite a, you know, a heavy number of pages, but
20 chapters.
yeah, it's like it was about, the finished book is about 170,000 words, but my first draft was 225,000.
Wow.
So you can see how much got chopped out. And my editors, thank God for my editors, because they were brutal in a good way. You know, they know how people read and what's readable. And it was fantastic that I had someone with the axe over their shoulder like that, because otherwise I was doing that clinging. Oh, it's mine. You know, I'm attached to what I've written. I can't take it out. You know, it's too important.
Yeah. I want to go back to here's a question that I've asked a couple of coaches. We've done a theme speaking with people who coach, and the reason we've done it is there's demand, interest, and mystery around the concept of coaching, depending on who you're speaking with in the corporate world. So you get folks who sit there worried that if they unlock the floodgates to coaching in an organization of 3,000 professionals, it's like, well, what are we going to destroy the time cards now? Like, what's going to happen here? So there's concern about it, even if there's interest. How do you know when a coaching relationship is done?
My way of knowing is my way of knowing is through the conversation with the person I'm working with. That's essentially how I know and check. And I have a sort of feeling and a sense of that, because, you know, I think intuition is a massive part of your awareness when you're a coach. You know, you're often picking up on things that you feel or sense in your gut, and saying, you know, I'm sensing something here. I'm not, tell me about this. Doesn't quite make sense. What am I seeing? How help me understand this? And so I sometimes just talk about that with the person I'm coaching, and I think there's a point where you feel, yeah, this is we're done. You got what you needed from this. And the other way of knowing is that as much as we can, it's hard because sometimes people don't know exactly, but when we're contracting to set up our relationship, you know, I'm asking the person, how will you know? What evidence do you need for yourself to know that you've made the shift that we're talking about? And they'll describe that, and they'll describe how it looks. They'll describe what their thinking will be. They'll describe what people might say about them by the coffee machine if they weren't there. They'll describe, you know, what their reputation is, how they'd like it to be spoken of. And those are physical things I can write down, and I can actually check. Are people speaking about you in this way? Are you hearing this? Are you seeing this? Are you feeling this? Yeah. And if they are, it's kind of obvious. Yeah. And I've had that confirmation. I mean, I coached a guy who was like a senior vice president in a big global manufacturing company in the US for about 4 or 5 months last year or the year before. And now I've had confirmation from things he's told me in those conversations, and subsequently written about what's happened to him since. Because that's the thing about coaching. I think in the coaching world, I think we all like to think that change is going to happen immediately whilst we're in the assignment and talking to people. But often what it turns out is it takes a person a year to 18 months to actually make those leaps. Sometimes it doesn't always happen when you're around or when you're in those conversations. And what an interesting problem, right? What an interesting problem when the quality of the puzzles, I think, that coaches are solving means that they are going to have a long duration, a long gestation period before things show up. Yeah, depends on the person, of course, you know. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how it is for other coaches, but for me, maybe the way I'm wired, you know, I sort of walk on a tightrope of being in the professional role of coach and observing and honoring all the rules that that means, so that the person has the space to change in the way they need to without me interfering, but also being a loving, kind friend to that person. And I have both. They're like simultaneous. I want to work with people where invariably I become personal friends with most of the people I coach, and we stay in touch.
Love the story about your 5 clients.
Yeah.
You went back to, and you just said, look, here's the situation.
Yeah.
You just tell me what you want.
Yeah.
That's a pretty high level of vulnerability.
And it's lovely because it really is sort of that transparency and that vulnerability, I think, is what life is for. You know, it's like, it's taken me a long time to get to that point, but I think that's the magic of life. And it's fantastic because some of those people that I had that conversation with came to my book launch 2 months ago in London. And we're still friends after 18 years. We haven't worked together, but we're still friends.
Yes.
How amazing is that? I mean, for me, I've got friends all over the world. My life feels so rich in that sense. I just, my heart is full. And a lot of my friends are people I met through working with them to help them find the path that was right for them. No, I didn't do it for them. I don't want to say, my mantra in life is humble curiosity. That's my own mantra. I keep telling that to myself. And I don't want to big myself up and say it's me. I think I'm skillful in the work I do, hopefully, but they do the work. But holding that space is a challenge.
Ray, am I putting you two on the spot if I ask for a recitation of your rules for happiness?
No, not at all.
Great, because
no.
Because I think there's great value in them. I think it also ties just so nicely with some of the things we've been speaking about. So you've got 6 rules for happiness. I don't know, maybe you've added to them. Do you have more? Or
no, not really. I mean, this is a good summary in the book, and I'm really glad that was one of the things my editors really pushed me to do. You know, they wanted those included, and I would not have written them in there. But the first rule, do you want me to just go through all 6?
Please.
Yeah. So the first rule, I think, to be happy, you've got to build a solid foundation inside yourself. Now, what I mean by this is, in the story, I talk about how I wanted to financially support an orphanage in Nepal and an elephant sanctuary in Thailand, and I wasn't sure how to. I had time and resources, but I didn't know what to do. And then life had me bump into a guy who had run 6 marathons, and I was intrigued. And I said, "Tell me about running marathons." And he told me all about it. It sounded really exciting. He was 10 years younger than me, and I said, "You think I could run a marathon?" I was 49 when I asked him this question. He said, "Yeah." He looked at me and he said, "Yeah, you look pretty fit. I think you could." He said, "Here's the deal. If you stay here living where I live in Chiang Mai, I will train you for 6 months how to run a marathon, and then you'll be able to do it." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." So one of the things that I learned through the physical training for a marathon is you start by working on your core strength, your abs and all those abdominal areas that are essential that they're strong, because you're going to put your body through a lot of physical stress training, your legs and your body, your upper body, and running and all these things. So it struck me that there's a similar core strength needed to be a great leader. And that's core strength comes from knowing your values, knowing what your purpose is, having a vision that excites you. So when you wake up, at least you can remember you're doing all this stuff for a reason that you're positive about. Knowing that you've got beliefs that really empower you and push you forward, and knowing you've got some beliefs that limit you. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not this enough or that. And you can put the own word in. But Brené Brown, I think, has really, catapulted the thinking on this area. Her work on vulnerability has opened up the minds of so many people. It's brilliant, her work. So, she's really made people more courageous around their vulnerability, or help them get there. And then Sir Ken Robinson, bless him, that lovely man who died last year, he talked about when you're in your element, which is when you've got these things that you're really good at, and then you've got these things you're really passionate about, causes. And then when those two things intersect, that's when you're in your element. It's like you could do it forever and do it. You wouldn't mind even if you didn't get paid. I love the work I do, even if it was for free. So vision, purpose, element, values, beliefs, these are all part of your core. So having a strong core is essential. That's one rule for success. And putting in the time to get that awareness and that understanding. The second one was, I think to be happy, I've learned I have to fully own everything that happens. I mean, it would have been very easy for me when my wife said, I'm leaving you, to turn that into a story like, no, I'm poor me, you know, it's not my fault. It's all about her. Woe is me, you know, how come this happened to me? I couldn't. I mean, I could see that I was a party to that event, and I had played my part in it, and I'd done or not done certain things that had made that outcome inevitable. I needed to own that and take ownership and really examine those things. And it's been like that ever since throughout my life. You know, I had to really know, well, if something's not working, there's always some reason outside, but there's always a reason inside me. There's always something that I'm contributing to this event that's happening. If you don't understand that, I think that's a really big blind spot. So fully owning everything that happens is one of my conditions for happiness, or rules for happiness. The third one is one of the things that I love talking about, becoming your own observer, I call it, because this is what I think is the most underused superpower that all human beings have, which is you can be sitting down thinking yourself into a state of unhappiness about some event that's happened, and you're really, all you're doing is you're living in a sort of fantasy about what's going to happen in the future based on your thinking, and it's horrid and horrible. Or you can somehow for a few moments separate from your thinking and observe yourself from a distance and go, oh, I see, at the moment I'm noticing that I'm thinking this is the end of the world. And is it really true? You know, and is that kind of thinking really helpful to me right now?
Yes.
Now, that ability to separate just for a moment and say, is it really true what I'm thinking? And is it going to help me if I think this? Or is there something else I could think instead that would be more useful? The observer, I mean, this is a deep, deep conversation, because the Buddhists talk about this ability to observe oneself a lot. That's why meditation gives you the energy and capacity to sit and observe your own thoughts without, it's a bit like if you were standing in a station in Singapore and you're watching the trains go through, the fast trains that don't stop. They go through the platform and you watch them go through. And that's just observing the train. But imagine if you're trying to get into the train and be in it as it's going through, you know, it's clearly, you know, not the right thing to do. So we get caught up in our thinking. And
what a great one.
Most of us, I'd say, live 80–90% of the time in our thinking mind.
Yeah.
We are literally caught up in our thinking. Like, for example, how often are you in a moment where what you're thinking and where your body physically is are all in the same place at the same time? Being present is what the Buddhists call it, presence. You're not, you know, you could be in a restaurant for your birthday with all your friends and you're still thinking about the contract you lost at work the 2 days before, or you're worried about how you're going to pay for the renovations on the house that are due in 3 months. So you're in that event and all these happy, smiling people, but you're not, your thinking is not there. You're disconnected from yourself.
Yeah.
I think most of us live in that way. I mean, for a lot of the time. And so you're basically missing your life. You're missing your own life, which is happening in the restaurant in that moment. That's life. That's real. That's what's happening. That's your life there. But you're missing it. You're not fully there.
Yeah.
And Thich Nhat Hanh is one of my most amazing, incredible teachers I met on this journey. And I actually met him 2 or 3 times, and he's lovely. He died last year as well. He said
it was a hard year for mentors.
Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh was one of the most beautiful men to have ever lived on earth. You know, he was 95 when he died. He fought for peace his whole life. You know, he taught about loving kindness and peace. I learned some amazing stuff from him. And he said, you know, the greatest gift you can give another human being is your presence, your complete undivided attention. There's nothing more precious than that. I know this to be true. That's number 3. Number 4, create powerful, purposeful, and sustainable relationships. Well, it seems to be kind of obvious to me. You know, I think I've been able to do a lot of things I've done in my life because I've had people who care about me. Why do they care about me? Because I've cared about them too. You know, I've been interested in their dreams and visions. I've contributed and supported them on that journey.
Yeah.
And I've got sustainable, powerful, useful, valuable relationships because of that, because I've shown up well in those. And I think that's something we can always work on and always improve. There's so much room for improvement in that one alone. I don't know if I can say any more about that, but that's how it's working. Number
I'll tell you
5.
what, every one of these that you're reading off, I feel like we could do an hour on, to be honest.
Yeah, we could.
They are just the like little tip of a dendrite that runs way back into many topics. And that one especially for me, we did touch a little bit on this business of friendship and the kinds of relationships that you've built with your clients and others, where they recur in your life, they come back. And there's a duration there, but I don't want to hold you up.
It's okay. But I think most people, sometimes conceptually, not actually, but conceptually, think of friendships a bit like books. You get a friend, it goes as a book on the shelf, and then it just sits there for years. I mean, you still describe that person as a friend, but in actual reality, you probably don't listen to half the things they say. You probably disagree with them on a lot of things. And it's not necessarily an empowering relationship. You both, when you talk to each other, collude to keep each other stuck in the way you are. And people don't call each other out and say, hang on a minute, that kind of thinking that you're telling me is going to keep you being a victim of that situation. What are you going to do about it? They just go, oh, yeah, poor you. There's a lot of collusion in friendships, and that isn't supportive.
So your adjectives are purposeful, powerful, and
sustainable. Yeah, because I've never stopped being a loving friend of those people that had the courage to say to me, Ray, you're being not your most powerful self here.
Yeah,
you need to listen to what I'm going to tell you, because if you carry on if you want, but I can see you doing this more powerfully than you're currently doing it. I don't think you should be thinking that way and doing those things.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the people, God, those are the people I want in my life. People that call me out when I'm not being my best self.
Yeah.
Friends, I don't mean colleagues. I mean, my friend, even my family, doing that would be great. But I think there's these collusions that we kind of keep going. We think if we don't, we're going to lose the friendship, or they won't approve of us, or they dislike us. We don't say what we honestly think and feel about what the person's telling us sometimes.
Or about the friendship itself as a third thing besides you and them, being able to say, like, look, this thing's unhealthy, or this thing needs some time and attention.
I've got hundreds of actual examples where this has served me. I can come up with one right now, which might be useful, which is when I was running First Place as the CEO of the company I eventually sold in 2008. I had a couple of people on my team who I really loved. They served me loyally. They'd really worked hard for the company. They were talented. They were young, and they were in the early parts of their careers. And there was one woman in particular. She was a fantastic coach and consultant, and she'd spent 5 years really pushing herself to learn and learn. Of course, she'd earn a lot of revenue for the company and stuff like that. And so I was under no obligation or pressure. I really wanted to find her a home to move to when I knew the company would no longer be operating. So I actually quietly went to one of our major rivals, because I was friends with the couple that owned that business, and we used to compete for business with them often. And I said, look, can I have a confidential and open-hearted conversation here? I've got this person on my team who is brilliant. I'm really, really sad we can't give her a home any longer, but I think she would be someone you could hire and you wouldn't regret it. She's amazing. And they listened carefully, and then they reached out to her and they made an offer, and she went and worked there. She was thrilled. She carried on her own learning. She was really successful there. They were really happy that I'd suggested it. But for me, the goal was to be at peace in myself and feel like I'd done the right thing for her. And that's the only motivation. I didn't gain financially. I didn't ask for any payment or anything like that. Just wanted her to be safe. 13 years later, I moved back to Europe because I met this woman from Poland and moved into an apartment with her as part of my journey. I thought, I'll reach out to her. I hadn't spoken to her for years and years and years, because my girlfriend wanted to be a virtual PA. And she said, do I know anyone that might need a virtual PA? So I thought of this woman. I didn't know what she was doing. I really hadn't been in touch that much. So I had this lovely conversation for an hour on the phone. She'd had 2 kids. She was married. She'd moved on. She was now in her 40s and a wise and successful businesswoman. And at the very end of that conversation, I almost forgot. I said, "Oh, I forgot to ask, what are you doing work-wise?" And she said, "Well, it's interesting you asked, because the company you got me a job in has been sold, and me and one of the founders, we're going to launch a new business." I said, "Oh, what's it called?" She told me, and I said, "What?" And she described how they were going to take the coaching world down to the emerging leaders, new leaders, younger people, and make it more widely distributed and stuff like that. She described the mission and the vision, and I said, "God, that sounds fantastic." I said, "You know what? I'm in Warsaw. I think I could easily fly. Could I join your team of coaches?" And she said, "Well, that would be interesting, Ray, because you were my boss for 6 years when we worked together, and then I'll be your boss. Is that all right?" I said, "Yeah, sure. I'd have no pride about that. That's okay. I'd love to serve you and support you and help you build a successful business. But I really love that kind of work, and I'd like to do it." She said, "All right, okay, fantastic. You're in the team." And that was because of the friendship. And that was 13 years since we last spoke. These things happen for me somehow. It's a kind of magic to life for me.
It sounds like there's quite a few of them that happen for you. Right?
Yeah. So this is I'm a bit of a storyteller too, so I know I wrap it on sometimes. But the last one I didn't cover was rule number 6 for happiness: empower and support others.
Yeah.
Because all the things I've alluded to. Oh, I missed out one. Number 5, I missed out. Pay attention to your health. And that's your spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional health.
Yeah.
I won't talk much about that, but I think how we take care of our own well-being is the most overlooked part of the corporate life.
Yeah.
And it's rising to the top as being one of the most important, especially after the COVID pandemic. But there's already a lot of people speaking and writing about that, so I'll let them do that. But it's definitely something you have to take care of. How do you stop yourself from burning out, becoming depressed, and all those things? And then the last one,
the cover, is that you?
Yeah, that's actually me on the way to Everest Base Camp in the Himalayas.
Yeah, I figured so.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's that.
Well, there's really something about that image, I thought. I mean, I know you said there's a lot of work that goes on with it, all this cast of characters, including cover design. But there you are. That path is rocky and uneven. Yeah. It's facing away, but it's also just facing like off into the distance. It doesn't sort of wend its way through dark forest. It just looks like what comes after that could be an absolute cliff or something. Yeah. So I just thought there's so many messages in there. I mean, there's a physicality also about this image, which I think like that's a well chosen image for all the things that are in your book. And I thought of it when you said, "Thank you. Got to take care of like what the Christians call like the temple," right? Yeah. Like that's the place where all these other very valuable things happen. Yeah. And so if it's if it's too full of poisons or a lack of sleep or something else, like the other more ethereal things are not going to flow there.
Exactly. And I was lucky that I met that guy, Matt, the marathon runner. And so I ran my first marathon in New York in 2009 and raised $15,000 for my foundation.
Yeah.
And then I ran 4 more in my 50s. So I've run 5 marathons in my 50s. And I'd never been a runner before, ever, so I'm sort of living proof. You can start doing physical stuff anytime. I wasn't superhuman or anything. And I feel like I'm in really good physical well-being from doing those things. I've taken care of it, and I still do stuff like that. So I'm 62 now, so it's just great to be in that place. But the last principle was empower others, because I feel like mastering oneself is only a step along the way to living an exceptional life. My happiness at the moment is mostly coming from empowering others. I'm okay myself. I know I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
How can I show up every day and be valuable to others? How can I humbly support people who are, I'm not trying to convert anyone. It's only for people who really want the support. They have to find me first and say, "I really want help. I want to get to this place. Would you support me?" And I say, "Of course I will. Of course."
Yeah.
And I have, like I do, I don't know how other coaches do it, but I maintain an intention of 5 minimum of 5% of my work is pro bono. I actually look for people to donate my time to,
Yes.
who I can support, who can't afford the resource, so that's very important for me. And I monitor that closely, so I'm always above that threshold.
Yeah.
And if I'm slipping below, I find someone, say, I'd love to support you. I know you can't afford a coach or stuff what you're doing, but I'd love to support you. Can I volunteer to help you?
Well, with that, can you believe that that's an hour? I mean, time just absolutely flew by.
Wow.
Suppose there is such a person who needs the pro bono support, or somebody who wants to engage with you otherwise, or I think maybe more pertinently at the moment, people just want to pick up the book and see what's going on in your story.
Yeah. I really, that would be great.
Like to direct folks?
Well, the books are for sale on Amazon globally. There's that's where to get the book is on Amazon. And I was always dreaming that people would read this book, and some would go, "Oh, yeah, next book, please," because that's how books are. Others would go, "Yeah, some interesting ideas in there," and another group of people go, "Wow, there's so much in there that's as applying to me right now in the journey I'm in. I'd really like some support." It doesn't matter to me which one people are in, but those people that are in that third group, I reach out, just message me, write to me, let's talk. I'm happy to have a virtual coffee with anyone that's read the book and said.
And what is the best way for people to do that? Is it?
I'm on LinkedIn. I've got my own website, thedailyexplorer.com.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn is easily the easiest, best way. I'm on that every single day. So LinkedIn is the best way.
Okay, well, we'll be certain to tag folks.
And thank you for inviting me onto the podcast.
Ray, take good care. Thanks.
Bye, Kevin.